Elric is ordered to greet the woman in front of him, so he has to step into a marriage he clearly never chose. Everyone else treats it like a proper welcome, but for him, it is a forced start to a life he is not ready for. He nervously greets Tyria, the bride chosen for him, and both bow as the ceremony begins. His shaky introduction makes her calm reply stand out even more. For one dangerous second, Elric imagines spending his whole life beside her, and the thought lands so hard that his face twists into a smile he cannot control. That gives away how badly the moment is hitting him. The rings go on, and the marriage becomes real before either of them has room to breathe. Elric only realizes too late that his reaction may already be hurting Tyria. This wedding is not romance. It is a sudden marriage that feels wrong from the start. Elric starts picking at the logic, and the more he thinks, the clearer it gets that something is off. The reason sits behind the ceremony. Weeping Barony once enjoyed great wealth and fame, but now it is drowning in debt and cannot even afford to live normally. Portman money offers rescue, but the price is this marriage, turning the deal into a trade for survival. Once he understands the shape of it, guilt hits him hard. He realizes he may have ignored her pain, and that thought nearly breaks him. He moves toward her in a rush of shame, then drops down and forces out the apology he should have had ready from the start. It is clumsy, late, and still the first honest thing he does here. Elric finally breaks, and the quiet bride who endured the ceremony starts sobbing. That's the moment he sees the damage clearly. The marriage is not only unwanted, it is already crushing the person trapped in it. So his guilt turns into a decision, and Elric resolves to have the marriage annulled. He signs the document, trying to undo the whole thing with ink before it can hurt her anymore. But the truth detonates before he can treat annulment like a clean escape. Elric begs for the marriage to be called off, then realizes she was not simply married off, she was sold. That revelation tears a scream out of him. Ending the marriage is no simple mercy now, because this has already turned into a transaction. His father answers with cold discipline, not comfort, ordering Elric to stop acting like a child and to behave like a noble as well. The rebuke makes it clear that obedience matters more than how badly he's hurting. Under that cold gaze, Elric learns what the family expects from him. Obedience first, feelings last. The lesson lands with all the warmth of a locked door. Then the story exposes the uglier belief underneath it all. A child born by devouring his own mother. That origin myth brands Elric as something shaped for use before he's allowed to be human. Holding flowers, he understands the role carved out for him. In his father's eyes, he is not a son with a future, but a tool with a duty. That is why his pain has nowhere to go. Elric lies there with the brutal realization that this is all he has ever been, and the marriage only proves how easily people like him can be used up. And at the center of it waits Elric's own wound. A girl handed power, then sold because money mattered more than her life. Elric's distrust of the match finally has a face, and it is the bride he already failed once. Years before all this, Elric turns his back on the life his father picked for him, and walks away for good. He decides that if his father is going to use him as a piece on the board, then he will at least ruin the plan on his way out, and that means abandoning the name Portimer too. At the same time, Elric sits alone with a part of the marriage nobody likes to say out loud. She is being sold. The silence around her explains why leaving her family behind cuts so deep, even if nobody in that house bothers to say it kindly. Elsewhere, the story hardens into battle legend, because Elric is not the only one being remade by duty. A mercenary knight is asked point blank if he means to take that path, and he says yes, which means he is stepping into a life where that choice will cost him. That choice dumps him into real war, where impact and blood replace any fancy speeches. He gets thrown back by the blast, staggers up battered and bandaged, and by the time his face is shown, it is clear he has already paid for the fight. Back in the household thread of the story, Elric watches a pregnant blonde woman being embraced while another woman in red looks on, and the contrast quietly underlines what she does not have. Elric is in that same emotional trap too, standing close with the blonde woman, as if both of them keep getting pulled into lives they did not choose. Then the war story slams the door open again, because this man is not just some soldier with a sword. The Imperial Army Elite Assault Unit, LeBron Vanguard, charges straight into the fight, and he answers the enemy like he means to break their line. The pressure keeps climbing as he shrugs off arrows, keeps cutting through the resistance, and leaves the survivors staring at him like they have just met a disaster they cannot stop. Kasha then steps in as the mercenary knight serving Shavor, and she makes it plain that anyone still standing is welcome to try their luck, which is a terrible invitation if you value your bones. Kasha feels something bigger coming, so she throws up a mana shield just in time to catch the beam head on. The blast still hammers the ground around her, but she holds, proving the attack is serious, and forcing her to absorb the first hit. Back on the edge of the conflict, two masked soldiers wait together in tactical gear, and one of them keeps a rifle ready like he expects the next problem to arrive in a straight line. Then red eyes flare with that ugly, dangerous kind of power, warning everyone nearby that the real fight has not even started yet. Elric closes the distance first, bowing her head into Elric like she has been holding this moment for 10 years, and refuses to waste another second. For a heartbeat, the reunion turns raw and personal, and the tears show how much this contact matters. The mood shifts to Aoi, lying in an ornate bed while a servant tends to him, so the calm is not simple comfort. He is injured or weak enough to need care. When he admits that smiling no longer comes naturally, the cost is emotional too. That shock carries into the house, where Elric meets a maid he does not immediately recognize, and asks her who she is. Elric answers with patience, accepts his apology, and eases the tension before it can turn the whole entryway into a funeral. With Rhonda guiding him from room to room, Elric starts greeting the household staff, and immediately discovers that everyone in this estate has an opinion about him. The gossip gets worse fast because they keep mangling yesterday's misunderstanding, then start calling him a pervert over the air question like that is normal dinner conversation. The bigger picture finally comes into focus. The estate sits out in the wheat fields, and Elric is back inside a house that still remembers his name. That means the family hierarchy, the old marriage, and every awkward rumor in the building are all about to matter again. Hoven Portman's shadow hangs over the inheritance talk next, and the story spells out why people fear him even after death. He was a ruthless merchant power who made enemies everywhere, so when Elric confronts what is left behind, the question is not just who suffered under him, but who gets the estate now. Elric is the one pressed for answers, because his loyalty to Hoven runs deeper than polite history. When the old man asks what he ever saw in that cold master, the answer turns out to be practical and ugly. Hoven converted the estate into liquid coin before he died, and the entire sum is left to Elric. Elric presses Elric about the one thing that matters now, whether his father ever left a real will. Elric can only admit he does not know the old man's true intentions, and that uncertainty hangs over the whole inheritance mess. What everyone does know is that Elric's father handled this business colder than usual, which makes the inheritance feel deliberate instead of accidental. Elric rides on in a carriage beside a silent red-eyed woman, so the will question follows him instead of staying behind as paperwork. Elric asks the blunt question at the center of all this. Why is she still living in the manor if the marriage was only a political deal? The answer lands hard, because she could have taken the estate and walked away, but she stays by her own choice. That is the real problem with a marriage built like a contract. Elric admits every marriage starts with strangers, which is his way of saying he never understood what she was doing while he was gone. Then he finally reaches her in the wheat fields, and after 10 years of vanishing, the first thing he can manage is a stunned, simple, "When did you get here?" That reunion matters because it proves she never left, not even after all that silence. The hidden machinery behind the estate finally comes into focus. The family wealth was turned into cash and parked under Elric's name, so the inheritance is less a gift than a trap with receipts. Elric immediately wonders why none of this was ever spoken aloud, and that question leads to the desk, the drawer, and the sealed letters nobody ever answered. The answer is ugly and quiet. Elric never sent a reply, so whatever truth sat between them stayed locked up for years. Now Elric is forced to think about Elric's silence in a new way, because it looks less like indifference and more like endurance. He catches himself asking why she would choose a path this hard, and the answer is sitting right there in the field with him. The scene shifts again, this time into Elric's own side of the story, where she is surrounded by household chatter and a maid who has absolutely no filter. The maid complains that the young master is a pervert who ran away and abandoned her for 10 years, then immediately starts talking about 2 children like she is already planning the family schedule. An older man in a formal dark suit enters, and Elric stops avoiding the letters. He apologizes for opening them without permission, admits he found them mixed in with the servant's mail, and brings the sealed correspondence into the open. Elric reacts like someone just yanked the floor out from under her, because this now looks very bad and she is already worrying that Elric will misunderstand everything. So she draws her line in the strongest way she can and declares that she is not the Lady of Wybin, she is the mistress of Portman. The dark-haired man takes her declaration in silence, his close-up reaction showing the words land hard. The blonde woman closes her eyes through the emotional fallout, and the room no longer feels like a simple conversation. After she has rejected the Wybin title so bluntly, he ends up alone with the papers, reading through the estate mess like a man who expected a homecoming and found bookkeeping instead. Whatever he sees there matters, because this stops being about feelings and turns into a fight over who gets to decide the future of Wybin. The talk around him shifts to old battles and clean victories, with one side boasting that losses stay low while the other side keeps rising anyway. It is the sort of legend making that always sounds impressive right up until real people have to live under it. Elric arrives at the Webben House mansion itself, which is the kind of place that announces money before anyone opens their mouth. He looks serious enough to know the next conversation is going to cost him something. Inside, Elric and the family are dragged straight into the inheritance dispute, and the room turns on the missing man as if he is already gone. They call him worthless, accuse him of abandoning his family, and start deciding his share for him, which shows how badly they think they already control the estate. Elric plants himself at the table like he has finally run out of patience, and the whole room senses it. Then another young man arrives late, apologizing for the delay, just in time to walk into a conversation that already hates him. Elric admits he has already read the letter sent to the estate, so nobody can keep pretending this is still a private argument. That matters because the inheritance fight is now out in the open, and he is refusing to let them talk over him anymore. Contempt finally gets a reaction, and his red-eyed glare hardens with barely contained anger. He leans forward, but the only thing he's really moving toward is the realization that Tyria is now the last one standing, and that makes the room feel a lot less safe. The pressure keeps building until even the wealthy old man loses his cool. Rattling off rings and status like that should end the argument. Then the woman reaches for his tie or chest, cutting him off in a move that only makes his silence say more than any speech could. He lets the room hear it. If they think he has finally remembered his place, they are too late. He keeps a sword in hand and refuses to answer with the loud, empty anger they seem to want. That cool restraint moment only makes the tension worse and the people around him feel it. He walks through the library under everyone's watch, then heads out by carriage toward the next confrontation, instead of letting the matter die there. Even after the argument, the protagonist is left drained and has to sit down just to catch his breath. In his own head, he spits on the whole noble game and worries that Tyria may see him as no better than the rest, which makes the marriage fight feel even uglier. The pressure inside the house keeps climbing as three people stand off in the library and the old insults turn into a full-on power contest. One man even starts bragging about crushing people under his heel, showing the room has turned into a threat instead of a conversation. Then the temper finally snaps into violence. One man laughs like a lunatic, another confronts a woman in the doorway, and a rope is drawn tight with deadly focus. The lash cracks down and slams the target into wood, making it clear someone has just lost control of the situation. From there, the story cuts back to where he was always heading. He steps out of the carriage and sees the woman waiting alone in the wheat field, and the sight hits him so hard that he can barely keep his composure. Elric turns toward him in the field and answers with that tiny, careful sound, like she is testing whether this really is him. The distance between them starts shrinking again, and after 10 years apart, even that small reply matters. Back in their shared memory, Elric needles him for staying so quiet, and young Elric fires back with the kind of overconfident promise boys make when they think the future is easy. She remembers being treated gently as a child, while he declares he will come back as a royal knight and make her the one begging to marry him. Elric keeps that memory close, holding on to the portrait of the boy who never became the knight he bragged about. She realizes their crossing was always going to happen this way, and that is exactly why the reunion hurts so much. Now she asks why he wanted to see her, and Elric finally sits before her and starts with the only honest thing he has left. He apologizes for running away on the wedding day and leaving her alone for 10 years, finally putting words to the pain she carried without him. Back when he was a child, Elric answers her memory with a promise so bold it could barely fit in a room. He swears he'll return as a royal knight and make her the one begging to marry him, turning a childhood vow into the reason she takes his words seriously now. Years later, that same girl refuses to let the moment stop at gratitude. She apologizes for taking up his time while he's busy, then stumbles backward in alarm when he loses his balance, making their awkward conversation suddenly turn physical. Elric finally asks about the mysterious Elric Jr., and the household promptly derails into gossip and confusion around that name. Rhonda notices he looks unusually cheerful and presses him about last night, so the talk shifts from curiosity to everyone trying to figure out what changed him. Elric holds onto the portrait and feels the gap between them close a little more after yesterday. Back in the present, she asked the boy who once vanished on her to go out with her for a while, turning that long distance into a real chance to meet again. Rhonda catches Elric trying to dress himself, and the moment turns into a small test of pride versus help. He insists he can manage, but she immediately decides his clothes need fixing, which means he is about to get corrected anyway. Rhonda keeps stripping the outfit down despite his protests, and the situation turns awkward fast. She reacts in shock while Elric panics, forcing the maid to cover his mouth before the embarrassment spreads any farther. Elric begs for secrecy, especially from Lady Elric, because the last thing he needs is that failed dressing attempt getting around. When someone says Rhonda rescued him, the reply shows the household already knew he was in trouble before he did. With the morning chaos behind them, Elric brings the first outing into focus and makes it clear this is their first time stepping out together. The moment is interrupted by someone recognizing Elric Portman and blurting out that the boy who ran away actually came back, which turns the outing into immediate gossip. Elric walks through Portman Estate Market with a companion, and the place has the uneasy feeling of a home that still remembers his name. He greets Michelle formally. She instantly recognizes the tiny boy she knew long ago. And then Bart comes in for an embrace so fast it looks like years of gossip got beaten to the punch. After the reunion with old faces, the carriage carries Elric and Elric through the golden wheat fields toward the part of the estate that actually matters now. He speaks to her as Lady Elric, declares that he wants to take responsibility as household head even though he's late by 10 years, and asks if he can be useful if she'll guide him. Elric answers without words at first, and the two of them place their hands on the ledger together, turning apology into work. That simple touch says the real problem has changed. This is no longer just about where he ran, but about whether he can stay and carry the house with her. Then the calm cracks again. Elric jerks in surprise with a cloth still in hand, and someone starts asking where Kasha the sword demon is, which means the estate's old trouble is not done with them yet. The story hard cuts back into battle noise, where soldiers roar for death and a dark-haired warrior drives straight through the fighting. That old war echo matters because it reminds us what kind of world Elric is still trying to keep his family inside of, even after all his running. The war echo keeps rolling for a second, and then the story snaps back to the festival, because Elric has to stand in front of people, not just survive them. The fighter on the battlefield is the same kind of legend the crowd wants to hear about, only now that legend has to dress up and smile. At the table, Elric gets a rare calm moment while Elric plays along with the public side of his life. He agrees to give the festival address, which is a lot easier than admitting he still has no idea how to be the man everyone thinks he is. Then Lord Elric steps up and blesses the Harvest Festival in front of everyone, trying to look like he belongs there. Elric points something out to him, and he still hides the ugly little detail that those men ended up swallowing swords for reasons he would rather not explain. The mood softens again when Elric laughs, and the day finally feels almost normal. Elric reminds her that the whole village used to know her as a legendary troublemaker, which makes her panic for one very specific reason. She absolutely cannot let him know how long she has been dreaming about being his bride. At the lantern ceremony, Elric leads the formal prayer for Weeben Barony's glory and prosperity before the lights go up. Then he moves close and kisses her, turning the public ritual into a private shock as she freezes and can only think, a kiss? Once the celebration surges on, Elric is left alone with the consequences of being brave in public. She panics that she has gone too far, then spends the night worrying in her room that Elric will think she is some brazen woman with no restraint at all. The scene shifts to the Chairman White meeting, where the pretty festival glow disappears and real pressure takes over. He lays out how the Emperor's western conquest and the collapse of Falben and Chevor leave debt and power on a knife edge, so the next move is to extract key figures and reclaim control before the whole stack falls. That strategy collides with Elric head-on when he defends what he has done, and Agnes stares at him in shock. The blow lands so hard that an onlooker says his knee should have been completely destroyed, showing just how much punishment he just absorbed. Then the warning comes in flat and cold. A woman tells Chairman White not to try anything improper or he will face the consequences. Right on cue, Rhonda reports that Kingdoms is on its way, which means the next trouble is already walking through the door. Rhonda announces that the Armen Kingdom has joined the bidding, and the room tightens up fast. That matters because the chairman fears being recognized by the Western Kingdoms, which could throw the whole fief into uproar. Rhonda announces that the Armen Kingdom has joined the bidding, and the room tightens up fast. The chairman's worry is simple and ugly. If the Western Kingdoms recognize him, his enemies can blow the whole fief wide open. The formal gathering keeps rolling, red carpet and all, while one shocked man visibly realizes something is wrong. Then the real problem shows its teeth when a hidden eye flashes red, and someone panics because a dangerous arrival has just been spotted. A red-haired man snaps into focus, furious and alert, because this new arrival is clearly a threat he already understands. That warning is about Kasha, and it tells us somebody has been searching for the mercenary for days. The answer is colder than the question. Kasha is being treated like bait in a trade scheme, which means this whole meeting is already a trap dressed up as business, and once that plan is spoken aloud, Elric has to step in and keep the envoys from turning the room into a scene. Elric formally welcomes the envoys to Weeben, the debt-ridden barony his family name still clings to while his hidden danger flares behind his eyes. He spots someone he does not want to meet here, and that shock forces him to stay composed on the spot. The old man realizes his mistake at once. The man in front of him is Elric, not Kasha, and that means the fearsome name he remembers no longer fits. Then the memory drags the story 5 years back, to the moment Kasha earned that reputation. Back then, Kasha storms an ornate hall and grabs his opponent by the throat, showing everyone that this is not a polite dispute, but a threat. The crowd recoils because one move from him is enough to turn the room into a panic. Kasha says he already knows exactly who he is, and that answer shuts down the other man's attempt to hide behind his family name. He cuts the ceremony short and refuses to waste another word on him. The insulted side answers by demanding a duel to settle the affront to their honor, and Kasha accepts without hesitation. He turns the challenge into a threat, promising to carve real etiquette into the fool's face. They square up and trade steel, and the moment it starts, the balance of the room changes. The opponent breaks first and begs Kasha to show mercy, but Kasha makes it clear that mercy left the building a while ago. That is why people still whisper the name Sword Demon Kasha, because this is not just a man with a sword, it is a warning label. The speaker's memory seals it in plain terms. The monster they saw back then is the same one everyone keeps trying to use as bait. Now the story snaps back to Weeben Manor, where Elric and Elric are finally being greeted at the gate, but the politeness only masks a fight over money and blame. The welcome line sounds simple, yet the real issue is who gets paid, who gets blamed, and who has been plotting in the dark. Elric cuts through the price talk and offers a straight deal of his own. Forget Oogie, bargain with him instead. He only asks for one condition, that the buyer match the price Armen put on the entire crop, which instantly turns a simple sale into a very expensive problem. The other side pushes back hard, saying he cannot just invent a price that high, even with imperial authority in the mix. But Elric holds the line, so the handshake seals the bargain before anybody can talk themselves out of it. With the deal signed, the room shifts from business to face-saving. The older man warns that Kasha being seen in Weeben after today will cause trouble, making it clear this agreement may still spark fallout. Then the whole gathering gets pulled to the table, where the tension finally shows its teeth. Someone blurts that this is completely insane, because the inheritance dispute has now turned into a public blow-up. More people pile in with shock, and one man demands to know whether the woman beside him understands how outrageous these terms are. He is even more stunned when he realizes that the lady standing there is the Lord's wife, and Elric calmly gives her name as if that alone should settle the room. That marriage twist changes the whole rhythm of the conversation, because suddenly Elric is not just negotiating crop money, he is dealing with his own household in public. The talk even narrows down to the ugly truth that he was supposed to sit back, collect the money, and follow someone else's tune, which makes his refusal look a lot more deliberate than polite. After that, the mood softens just enough for a quiet handclasp to matter, and Elric face each other while he says she completely overturned his expectations. Her answer lands with the kind of magnetism that makes the rest of the room feel 2 sizes too small. Elric starts thinking one step ahead, because once someone upends his plans this thoroughly, he knows there has to be a bigger channel behind it. He reaches the conclusion that they will need the proper channel for the next move, so This dispute is no longer just about dinner table politics. The story then widens to the House of El vs. Graham, where an ornate document leaves someone blinking in confusion over what it actually is. When Elric Portman gets recognized by name, the paperwork stops being harmless and turns into a real threat. The warning comes fast, they have to get out of there now. A beast crashes into the moment, one huge claw swinging down, while the people below scramble and shout for each other to move before they get turned into a cautionary tale. The group barely keeps its footing as the creature bears down on them, and now the threat is obvious even without all the shouting. This is no longer a social dispute or a marriage headache. It is a real monster problem that needs a response before the estate starts losing people. Elric digs into the monster encyclopedia to identify what they are dealing with, and that book gives them a real plan instead of blind panic. Once they realize the residents could face the same attack, she orders a subjugation party right away. Aldio then leaves with the soldiers in carriage, promising to return quickly while the woman sends him off in kind. The farewell sits over the wheat fields behind them, making the estate feel calm for one last moment before the fight pulls that piece away. Elric's name finally snaps through the chaos, and the family around him reacts like the fight just got personal. The old guard steps in next, vowing they will not let their lord walk into danger alone again, so they carry the risk this time. Elric answers with the same stubborn calm she always keeps for the estate, saying this is her duty to stand with them. Then the healer's question about the neck scar shifts the moment from loyalty to a possible injury that still matters now. The young man realizes his father caused the scar, and the shock hits him so fast he can barely speak. The healer sees the emotion hit and he starts to fold inward instead of answering, which is honestly one brutal way to process family news. That shock gives way to another turn as Elric Portman looks back and Lytton barrels in with excited relief. Glad he made it back to Weeben Barony, the debt-sick home he returned to after years away. He even rushes in from behind in a celebratory embrace, which is a lot warmer than his reputation usually suggests. Before anyone can settle that reunion, Leighton's scout comes running with urgent dispatch news, shouting so hard the message sounds half like panic and half like rage. Two men tense up at once, because whatever is on that scroll is bad enough to stop the whole movement cold. The next arrival raises the stakes again when someone identifies Lady Elric of Portman House, and the scene cuts to a snowy front where she and another figure are trapped with danger closing in. Out there, the fight is no longer about pride or inheritance, it is about getting people out alive. A dark creature pushes through the snow, so the defense answers with raw force and gets hit back just as hard. The soldiers immediately switch to survival, ordering the women back, lighting the glowstones, and luring the enemy toward the town so they can hold the line where it matters. Elsewhere in the snow, a man apologizes to Elric for dragging her into this mess, then tells her rescue is coming and she only has to hold out a little longer. He starts worrying that she thinks he is unreliable, which is not great timing, but the whole situation is already doing the most. The soldier cuts through the chaos to keep Elric focused, telling him to trust him and get ready for a rescue. That turns the clash into a deadline. Lytton has to reach the trapped comrades before the fighting closes in. Lytton makes the promise explicit, saying he will bring the hunters back and that Elric needs to go to his wife. He backs it with a confident smile, and if he cannot deliver, that new knight confidence will collapse fast. Elric accepts the order, sends the younger soldier to show the way to the trapped comrades, and gives Lytton the lead. That shifts the rescue from talk into action, with the group finally moving on the target. Lytton fixes on reaching her alive, then points out the cabin in the distance so Elric can follow the road. That narrows the whole danger down to one place they have to get to fast. Elric reaches Elric, and the shock in their faces makes the delay hurt even more. He admits he stayed away to keep them out of danger, but 10 years of silence still hangs between them. Elric asks Tyria if she really trusts him that little, and the old distance finally cracks. Tyria answers by promising obedience, which shows how much history still sits between them. Just when the reunion starts to breathe, a servant rushes in with the news that the hunters have returned. The conversation snaps back into a new crisis before anyone can relax. The hunters report that a man stayed behind alone against demonic beasts so the others could escape. Lytton explodes at the woman in front of him, because that reckless sacrifice has clearly changed everything. Elric takes Elric's hand, and Lytton answers with the same kind of steady grip, treating her worry like a thing he means to honor. He swears he will bring Lytton back and return safely himself, then accepts her warning as the price of that promise. That promise does not get time to settle before the sky itself joins the argument, dropping a massive claw into the fight. The rescue becomes a full assault in an instant, and now everyone is fighting just to keep the line from breaking. Lytton answers the wolf pack with blue lightning and a clean slash, and the battlefield finally remembers that he is not the same man who used to hesitate. He fights while thinking back to the small scrawny captain he once knew, because that memory drives home how far he has come. Then his power keeps climbing, spilling out in a violent burst that forces the wolves back and leaves them open. Elric finishes with one massive strike, and the beasts stop testing him and start getting erased. In the snow, Elric spots a figure and blurts out Lyson's name, trying to confirm the person he's found. The off-screen reply answers with a challenge, not a greeting, which keeps the encounter tense and uncertain. A bandaged figure asks Lytton for one more favor, and Lytton refuses to keep drawing attention attention to himself. The startled reaction makes it clear this request is tied to the aftermath of something he just handled. The crowd erupts as officials praise Litten for facing demonic beasts alone, turning his fight into a public triumph. Litten keeps the credit grounded by saying he only drew his sword for Weeben's peace. Litten decides the noise has gone far enough and says he should head back too, cutting the ceremony short. He tries to leave the celebration before it pulls him in any further. Then Elric greets Elric like she has been holding that welcome in for years, and the first thing out of her mouth is worry that he stayed away longer than expected. That lands the real blow. The wife he abandoned never left the estate, and she remembers every missing year. Out in the wheat field, Elric starts to speak to Elric, and he turns toward her as if the last 10 years are suddenly too heavy to keep carrying. Her hesitant start matters because this is the first real break in the silence between the abandoned husband and the wife who stayed. Elric's shock hits first, and then Elric suddenly gives out in front of him. The reunion does not soften anything. It turns into a collapse that leaves him scrambling to catch her. Elric catches her before she can fall all the way, and the calm, careful man from before is gone in an instant. He cries out for his lady because she has lost consciousness, and now the only thing that matters is keeping her from going down. He keeps begging Lady Tyria Weeben to wake up, desperate enough to say her full name like it is a lifeline. The plea turns the moment into a crisis, with Elric finally forced to face how bad this is.